But before we do that, I'd really like to welcome up Ruby Rose Jennings, as I said, the queen of automation, consumption and creation, and a badass. And that's referenced by 3 different independent people. Hey, okay, thanks.
Hello. Hiya. I'm afraid I've got some notes because I hadn't had much chance to kind of rehearse this. Yeah, I'm here today to talk to you about automation in future cities and the ways in which automation can destroy communities and also in ways in which we can kind of use automation to kind of create better communities as well. It sounds a bit dry, but it's kind of weird and creepy, so it's kind of good. So yeah, so my name is Ruby. There we go, this is me. I'm a set builder by trade, and I'm also a sculptor, so I build really large-scale creative works that kind of people can interact with, so they're all about kind of public access, recycled materials, things like that. I'm on a fellowship at the moment with the Southwest Creative Technology Network, looking at automation. So the whole focus of what I'm doing is looking at ways in which automation can kind of change our world, but also ways in which we can kind of use automation to kind of make the world more socially democratic and more interesting. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So, this is Pepper. Pepper's a robot. Now, the new thing that's coming in is called the 4th Industrial Revolution. And this is kind of like, it's about robotics and automation, basically. We kind of need to look at what a robot is to kind of understand this. And a robot comes from the Czech word robota, meaning forced labor, which was first used to denote a fictional humanoid in a 1920s play by Karel Čapek. A robot is a machine, especially one programmable by computer, capable of carrying out complex actions. And we're on the cusp of the robotics revolution. It's really different to... is it that way? It is. That way, sorry. Slide issues. There we go. Really different to the preceding 3 revolutions, which are kind of steam and water power, electricity and factory processes, and computerization, because it will challenge our ideas about what it actually means to be human. As we implement smart technology, machines will interact and visualize the entire production chain and make decisions autonomously about our cities, about our homes, and about our workplaces. It's going to impact everybody. Smart technology, 5G, things like this, they're going to come in to every aspect of our lives within the next 10 years, and there's not really much we can do to kind of stop that rollback. The velocity and the scope of the system's impact make it a completely distinct era from anything that's gone before. Like, the history of automation and computational knowledge is not just one of clever machines taking the place of human workers. It's a story of the concentration of power in fewer hands and the concentration of understanding in fewer heads. And the price of this is going to be a wider loss of power and understanding. I don't know if you can see that, guys. But in the future, this is a really interesting quote by Klaus Schwab. He's the head of the Economic Forum. And he says that in the future, talent, not capital, will be the critical part of production. So it'll all be about people's knowledge in their heads and what they know, and not about what physically they can do. So we're increasingly going to see a massively segregated job market. So you have really lovely, high-income, high-tech jobs where you get treated really well. And then on the bottom end of the market, the bottom's going to drop out of all the low-income jobs that so many people completely rely on. So the economic divide we already see in this country is only likely to widen in the next 20 years, which for our communities is going to create a very interesting kind of social mix. Technology is one of the main reasons why many incomes have stagnated or even decreased in the majority of the population in high-income countries. As the high skill demand increases, the low-skill jobs become increasingly automated and unnecessary, meaning that low-skill, low-paid jobs are going to kind of disappear. And in some ways that's not all bad, because, who wants a meaningless job? Who wants a job where you just turn up and click a box? And there are so many jobs out there now that do that. Call center work, even some kind of legal work, a lot of the physical processes, working in supermarkets, bar work. All of these things can be jobs which can have meaning, but inherently sometimes just don't. But the problem is that in the neoliberal framework in which we exist, in the society that we now exist, there's nowhere to go if you don't have those jobs. We don't support people to actually do jobs that are socially relevant. So to not have those jobs means no work at all. And for a lot of communities, no work means no pride, because our society is completely around who we are by what we do. So if you're not doing, you start to wonder who you are and what your meaning is in this world, in this kind of really capitalist situation. It can destroy communities as well. If a big plant closes because of automation, then you're looking at a whole town, like somewhere like Swansea, or any of the small towns in Wales, just completely wiped out by it. 2,000 jobs losses, that is a lot of people without work. And that's kind of one of the really big downsides of automation. I'm going to do all the really negative bits first, but then there is a positive bit, guys. Don't worry, like, it gets better. So also, like, we really have to think about bias. So the thing about AI and like artificial intelligence is that in Silicon Valley, where it's designed, and in these tech centers where it's designed, people just see it as this wonderful, infallible thing, the answer to everything. So like Apple's magic word for tech is literally magic. They want tech to be miraculous and unknowable. So you look at an Apple product and you're like, oh my God, it can do everything for me. It can answer every question. But AI is programmed by and gathers data from people. It can be, in its best way, it can be thoughts made flesh. I mean, coding can be pure poetry. But actually, it also reflects our worst traits as humans. It can be racist, it can be sexist. And like urban design and architecture, it's like remarkably designed by white, middle-class, middle-aged men. I mean, most programming is done by that one tiny subsector of society. And their biases are then reflected the whole way out into the AI system. So everywhere you see, every kind of interaction you have with artificial intelligence, you're interacting with the bias of the white middle-class man, which is just not very great, is it? Again, we're still quite doomy. So like some really good examples of that are things like, so Google have got this thing now where they use artificial intelligence to hire people. So if you apply for Google and you have a non-white name, or if you're a woman, they'll automatically mark you down because the algorithm thinks that the best people to actually get in for interview are people who are like the people who already work for Google. So you're looking at white middle-class men. Insurance premiums. So if you're applying for insurance, and again, if you come from like a predominantly like people of color area, or like any kind of area that's seen as a bit poor, or if your name is not like typically white, your insurance is going to be higher, again, because of the algorithms, because they're saying, well, you know, you're not the norm. But AI has a very interesting idea of what the norm of society actually is, even down to automation. So like hand dryers, right? If you use a sensor-operated hand dryer and you're a person of color, it's less likely to work because it's trained on white hands. So imagine when you come to like door technology, things like that, you're trying to even walking into a university building in a few years' time, and it's a sensor, and it doesn't work because it's all trained on white people, basically. It's just really crap, isn't it? Alexa as well. So Alexa only really understands the white Californian accent. So if you talk to it, it just tends to just be like, they did a study on it, and it was like a 20% difference between like white middle-class men and like women of color. It's a big one. So yeah, so tech without humanity is heartless and really destructive. But it's okay, guys. It's going to be all right. Like, there's ways we can deal with it. There's this other issue about this like massive slide into conformity. So automation should really make life easier. That's the whole point of it, isn't it? That technology is just going to come along, and we're going to be able to just have these really calm, friction-free lives where we just step in and like everything is done for us, everything is simple. But unfortunately, confronted by complex problems, under time pressure, which we're all under all the time, people try and engage with the least amount of cognitive work possible, preferring strategies that are easy to follow and to justify. And given the option of relinquishing decision-making, the brain takes the road of the least cognitive effort, following the shortcuts presented by automated assistants. So what I mean by that is basically, if you want to let a computer make your decisions, so you quite often will just because it's simpler than going through a process yourself, Computation is a cognitive hack, offloading the decision-making process and responsibility to a machine. Life accelerates, things just keep getting quicker because so much is automated, and the machine steps in to handle more of the cognitive tasks, reinforcing machine authority regardless of the consequences. Sorry, that bit's quite heavy. We refashion our understanding of the world to better accommodate the constant computational shortcuts and alerts that we are given. And computation then replaces conscious thoughts. We think more and more like the machine, or we just don't think at all. We retrain our speech to be more intelligible to Alexa or to Siri. We allow Gmail to write our emails for us. And slowly, culturally, we become narrower and more normalized because of this. But hey, this is not a definite future. We really, really have to have hope. Because there are so many possibilities with this technology. There are so many ways we can engage with it. There's so many things that we can actually do to make change as individuals in this time. And hope is in itself a rebellious act. Optimism means embracing the possibility of change and therefore affecting change as individuals and communities. And the real enemy of change is not the stubborn resistors, but it's the apathetic people in the middle who just let things kind of roll. And to have no hope is to have apathy. So you have to have hope. So we need to democratize technology to prevent this irreparable gap appearing between the rich and the poor. And what I'm going to talk about now is kind of like ways in which we can do that. So design is a really massive one. So if any of you, I hear that some of you guys are architecture students, right? This is totally your job, I'm just putting this on you. Because actually, how we design our future cities is going to be one of the major ways in which we can change the future societies for the better. And having that thought about society, and also having you guys look like a really mixed bunch, which is brilliant. Like, having like a whole mix of people coming into architecture, into planning, into kind of computational design, that's going to be like such a good thing for the world, because it will mean that we have more understanding of the wider communities rather than just this narrow subsection. I just keep saying white middle-aged men. Yeah, so algorithmic bias may not be intentional, but it is negligent. Technologists might not have seen it coming, but we didn't really care to look. Convinced that technology is neutral and objective, we mistakenly assumed bias was impossible, and concerned only with the productivity of the product, we overlooked the impacts on wider society. And design is in itself applied ethics. By designing high-tech work, we are reshaping the world around us. Design is like inherently political, and we need to think really carefully about what kind of world we're creating this work for. So one of the things as an artist I've been working on is making the unseen world, this world of technology, visible to people. Because as a society, we can't understand technology unless we can kind of see it. If we cannot perceive the network, we cannot act effectively in it, and it just makes us completely powerless. And we've become more and more simplified in our thinking as well as people in the last few years. We're looking for overly simple answers to a really complex world. The internet seems to be becoming more and more black and white. And the thinking and the arguments there are just without any kind of depth or resonance. But actually, society itself is becoming ever more complex. So this kind of like trying to like simplify everything down is actually, as a society, it's making things worse. I don't know if this Brexit thing is like a really fine example of that, you know, black and white, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. If you look at stuff like that, you can never really solve complex problems. So our inability to see beyond the black box, to comprehend the technology beneath, leads us to ever more simplistic and divisive points of view, when in fact the world is, just loads more complex. So there's loads of ways we can understand it from the inside. We need to make it more visible. So we need to be able to see the network. We need to make programming like a total craft that doesn't just seem like an inaccessible thing to the majority of the population. We need to understand and translate it to people who don't want to code, like me. I mean, I can't code, but I've learned to understand about technology without that, you know. We need to show the bias that's inherent in the coding and show how search engines work. And we need to show the flow of information. So that information that we freely give to the computer world, to the digital world, and also that information that's taken from us without consent. All those licensing agreements we endlessly click through, I mean, what do they actually mean? What is needed is not new technology, but new metaphors and language to describe in the visible world the complex systems of the network. One that simultaneously acknowledges and addresses the reality of the world in which people, politics, culture, and technology are actually enmeshed. But how can we truly understand technology? One way is to see AI from the perspective of itself and understand its Umwelt. It's a really good German word, which is demarcated by its range of perception. So a creature's Umwelt is all the things it can see. So without knowing what the AI actually perceives of us, we can't really understand it. So whatever artificial intelligence might come to be, it will be fundamentally different and ultimately completely inscrutable to us. Despite increasingly sophisticated systems of both computation and visualization, we are no closer today to truly understanding exactly how machine learning does what it does. We can only adjudicate the results. Recognizing that another can see the world differently to us is the first step towards comprehending that we need to accept and embrace the differences between us. There is a convincing argument that becoming attuned to the needs of another helps understand all the ways in which we can make a more livable world for everyone and everything. And that's kind of ethics in a nutshell, really. So the other really big thing we can do is worry about anthropomorphization and kind of really avoid that. So when we look at robots that look like us, there's a mismatch between what we expect the robots to be able to achieve and the robots' actual capabilities. We're really likely to endow humanoid robots with attributes that they do not have, like empathy, cruelty, sensitivity, love. You know, you're rolling straight into Blade Runner territory. The moment you see something that seems human, you just instantly convince yourself that it's more intelligent than it actually is. So we will expect humanoid robots, especially those with well-designed facial muscles and the ability to track and follow head and eye movements, to be really intelligent, really capable. And believe me, there are robots out there right now that can follow you like this and feel really human. My whole fellowship thing is about building things that give you, bring emotions from you by their very movement, and there are so many people out there doing it, and it's quite creepy. So this could lead us to believe, trust them, and follow their instructions unquestioningly when they are likely to be prone to the same biases and data issues that we currently see in the software. So we need to make sure we create robots that destroy the illusion of humanity, that break the fourth wall and remind us that they are indeed just intelligent machines. And collectively, we really need to take ownership of technology. So the most exciting thing I've found in my fellowship is this whole thing about 3D printers. I mean, who's used a 3D printer in this room? Oh, wicked. Loads of people. Fantastic. So I don't know about the fact, does anyone know that you can recycle 3D printed plastic, right? Yeah, so everything that's 3D printed can just be reused, recycled, and recreated. And that's really powerful, because if you think about it, if you can download or create in your own software the technology to design anything you want, then you can make anything you want in your home. You don't have to get stuff shipped halfway across the world. You don't have to buy stuff off Amazon. You just have to buy the template and print it. You know, it means we can come to revise and replace the things we own within the house instead of continually buying more and more short-term, environmentally unhealthy crap. Developments in automation robotics are slowly destroying the need for the linear processes of a factory. And you can buy a machine to recycle 3D printed plastic at home. So you're just, you can print out your baby toys, you can print out your cups, your engine parts, you're getting printed steel as we speak, printed aluminium, printed rubber, and all these things you could potentially recycle within your own village. So the fast pace of technological change, the approach of affordable home-based 3D printers and robotic arms, along with open source software, will allow us to design and create pots, plates, engine parts, toys, electronics, and many other consumables at home. And what would be more disruptive than actually taking hold of the means of production? I mean, that is like pure communism, right? Imagine a time when you could get everything you needed for your high-tech lifestyle inside your own village, printed and created locally from endlessly recycled materials and powered by solar technology, designing and redesigning your kids' toys, and recycling them at home and rebuilding them when you're bored of them. All of us becoming small-scale batch producers of unique, innovative, local, cheap craft. It could revolutionise the way we live and address some of our biggest environmental issues. So, personally, I'm all for just the return of cottage industry. We don't need these big industrial processes anymore, and we won't do in the next few years. And I think that's something that is going to really revolutionise the way we live in a really positive way. I think the most important thing I'd say about all of this is that collectively we are really powerful. If you look at XR, that is a great example of something that has gone out and actually is making massive change. Sometimes it feels like this change isn't happening because things take time, but I don't know how many conversations I've heard in the media or on the radio about climate change in the last year that you wouldn't have heard a year ago or 2 years ago. And it's the same with technology and ethics. These things are changing, and we just have to kind of take ownership of it to drive that, because if we don't, we'll just become the apathetic middle, and these things will just roll over us. So there's loads of really practical things you can do if you're kind of personally really worried about automation. You can deinstall Siri. There's this really great thing you can make with a Raspberry Pi to go on top of your Alexa so it can't hear you unless you ask it to. You can learn more about data flow. You can read licensing agreements. You can choose who to buy from. But I think the most important thing for architecture students, especially, is we need to look at ways we can decommodify the public space. Obviously, advertising is a really massive thing right now. And I thought that maybe as a little workshop, we could actually just come up with some ideas and ways we can kind of disrupt that.